Hey everybody, it's Eileen Dickinson, and today I want to talk to you about a book I read recently called Self-Compassion by Dr. Kristin Neff. I believe this topic might be the most important one I've shared so far, so I'm really excited. So there are so many gems from this book. I highly recommend getting it at some point if it's an interesting topic to you, but today I just want to share the top things that I got out of it. The top 3 takeaways I got out of the book Self-Compassion are: 1, the differences between self-compassion and self-criticism. 2 is the differences between self-compassion and self-esteem. And 3 is the components that make up what self-compassion is. Okay, so my first big takeaway from the book Self-Compassion is the difference between self-compassion and self-criticism. Now, self-criticism is giving yourself a hard time for making mistakes, for not being good enough, for not being where you want to be. And in the book, she gives a lot more detail on why we may be like this to ourselves. But one really stood out to me, and that was that it keeps us safe socially. I'm actually going to read you an excerpt from the book on this because I just don't think I can even put it in words the way that she does. So I'm just going to read a little excerpt. So, consider, for example, how people often criticize themselves in front of others. I look like a cow in this dress. I'm hopelessly inept with computers. I have the worst sense of direction of anyone I know. It's as if we're saying, I'm going to beat you to the punch and criticize myself before you can. I recognize how flawed and imperfect I am, so you don't have to cut me down and tell me what I already know. Hopefully, you will then have sympathy for me instead of judging me and assure me that I'm not as bad as I think I am. This defensive posture stems from the natural desire not to be rejected and abandoned, and makes sense in terms of our most basic survival instincts. That really resonated with me. I really could relate to what she was saying there, and as soon as I read it, it already invited some self-compassion because I was able to say, oh, I was just trying to keep myself safe. Like, it's just an instinct to do that and to protect myself. There's nothing wrong with me that I was doing that. So the difference between self-compassion and self-criticism is truly everything. They're really opposites. So then, self-compassion. We are going to go into much more detail on what makes up self-compassion, but just to start, if you can't really identify what it feels like to feel compassionate for yourself, it may be helpful to just imagine what it feels like to feel compassionate towards someone else. And I think it's also helpful when we think about someone else to imagine why it may be causing us distress to be critical of ourselves. So just if you imagine you spend time with someone every day, and if every day your words to that person were really critical and giving them a hard time about not doing what they wanted to do in their life or for the mistakes that they were making, you can imagine what kind of toll that would take on the person. And then you can also imagine if you were with someone every day and every single day they were really compassionate with you, or you were really compassionate with them, how that would impact them. So in the book Self-Compassion, she invites you to start observing how you are talking to yourself. In particular, it can be easy to notice more the times when something goes wrong. How do you react to it? Are you hard on yourself about it or not? And just observe. And I think that she really emphasizes that you don't let this be another reason to be critical of yourself. So if you are critical of yourself, nothing's gone wrong. As we said before, there's a reason that we default this way, and I only gave you one of them. She gives a lot more explanation in the book on why we are this way. So just really understanding that that's fine, that that's where you're at, and just noticing that can be a really great place to start. The second big takeaway I got from this book was the difference between self-esteem and self-compassion. I thought this was really interesting because I guess I had probably thought of them as very similar before. And the way she separates them is that self-esteem is more of a positive judgment, or good self-esteem is a positive judgment. So it would sound like, I am a good person. I am a smart person. I am good at this. I am attractive. Like, if that's what maybe having good self-esteem would sound like in your mind. And she says the problem with that is, that's all well and good until someone comes along who maybe is smarter, or seems like more of a good person, or seems like better at the thing that you're good at, and it kind of threatens your identity and your self-esteem. And also, so say, for example, you are saying you're a good person, and that's a thought you have, I'm a good person. But then you do something that's really out of character, and maybe what you would define as not being a good person. And then you may have the tendency to really end up giving yourself a hard time because in that moment you're not living up to this identity you have built for yourself in your mind. So then the difference with that and self-compassion is that self-compassion recognizes that we all have positive and negative traits. We all have strengths and weaknesses. We all are probably pretty good at some things, and then working on other things and learning, and we all have good and bad, and that it doesn't define us. It's just how we are as humans. Self-compassion says, when I don't live up to the expectation I had of myself, I can be kind to myself. I can be compassionate to myself in that moment for being fully human. That leads me to my third big takeaway from this book, which is the 3 aspects or components that define self-compassion. Those 3 things are self-kindness, shared humanity, and mindfulness. And I'll tell you about each one. Okay, so we'll start with self-kindness. Self-kindness is made up of a couple things. It starts with the words that we speak to ourselves. So like before when we talked about self-criticism, the words when you're being critical of yourself might sound something like, ugh, why did I do that? Why am I always doing this? I'm the worst. What's wrong with me? And so it's just noticing those thoughts and taking a step back and choosing to offer yourself kindness instead. Maybe, just saying, oh, right, we're a human being. We mess up sometimes and it'll be okay. So it goes it goes from critical to kind, and then comforting. So like really giving yourself the comfort you need in that moment. So yeah, a good place to start with that is just to ask yourself, what do you wish someone would say to you? When you are upset and you maybe vent to someone, sometimes we have those friends that know exactly what to say, and so you may be able to identify something they say and use that for yourself, or just sometimes we leave conversations feeling worse, and it's probably because we were seeking something and we didn't get what we were seeking. So really identifying, like, what do you wish someone would say to you when you're upset, and really giving that to yourself. Another way to be kind to yourself is physically soothing yourself and comforting yourself. And I love this aspect so much. When I read this, it really resonated for me. I think as a body worker, it made so much sense. So I'm going to share with you some of the ideas she had, which I love. I might even make a shorter video that's just this part because I just think it's so great. So the few ideas are, one is hugging yourself. So it's like really giving yourself a big bear hug, like actually fully hugging. And I think the most important part is actually like, I mean, I think it works even if you don't, but it's really helpful if you have the intention of compassion and soothing yourself, like using those kind words at the same time. So I think it's the best to imagine you did something where you're feeling just like, why did I do it? Right? So instead, doing one of these and maybe closing your eyes, feeling what that feels like to really be like, I'm offering myself a hug, and I'm offering myself compassion right now. Another thing you can do is actually just imagine yourself giving yourself a hug. So this works for people that are maybe more visual, or if you are maybe in public or something and you feel a little weird doing this somewhere, you can just, it helps me definitely to close my eyes and I just imagine my actual self coming up to myself and hugging myself. And sometimes I imagine myself maybe like comforting myself like this, like, and what that would look like to just have the nurturing that I would want in that moment. And another way is just through like a little self-massage like this, or stroking of your arm, whatever feels soothing to you. This is really soothing yourself, like just giving yourself the comfort and saying, it's okay, it's okay, you're a human being. These things happen. It'll be okay. And at first you may not feel anything from this. You may just feel really weird. But over time, and I think what I did originally is I just waited. Like I just sat and did these things until I felt a sense of warmth in my body. And I was able to feel like what it felt to comfort myself in that moment, to give myself compassion and feel warmth from myself. And it was really beautiful. So I really think I might make another video on just that aspect at some point because I really love it so much and I just could actually keep talking about it more, but I will not. I will go to the next aspect of self-compassion, which is shared humanity, which I've touched on a little bit so far, but it's basically recognizing that you're not alone, that everyone on Earth suffers and experiences the same emotions, that every human makes mistakes. They say that as like a phrase, like, oh, they're only human, because it's really true. And just recognizing, like I talked about before, that all of us are making mistakes. All of us have good and positive traits, and all of us have flaws and things we're working on. And there's really something comforting about this. And she again goes into much more detail on why this is so comforting for us, but it really is around understanding that you're not alone, that we all experience these things, and that there's nothing wrong with you for feeling them. And I think it helps you to feel less isolated, and it helps you to just identify your humanness, that like that's normal for you to make mistakes and not be perfect. I'm not inherently wrong or bad. I'm a human. The third component of self-compassion is mindfulness. And mindfulness is really just looking at the present moment for what it is. It's paying attention in a specific way without judging. And she ties this in a couple ways. So it's one, basically being aware. So just acknowledging that you're suffering. And I think sometimes we don't, because often our little moments of suffering don't feel worth attending to. If you're feeling a little down about something, it's actually stopping and acknowledging this moment of suffering that you're having. That is part of being mindful. So just awareness of what's going on. And then it's definitely a practice of accepting the present moment for what it is. So she talks about how resistance to what's really happening causes suffering. So it's recognizing that even if there's something we really don't like or don't think is good for us in the moment, it's accepting it for what it is. It's saying, this is really this is what's happening right now. It's looking at it for what it is, seeing it clearly. I won't go into more detail on that because her book definitely goes into more on it, and of course you can find a lot of information. I can give you more information, and the internet is full of more information on the practice of mindfulness, but I see that it's one of like the pathways to being compassionate, because it's allowing what's actually happening to come into your awareness and to be. So those are my biggest takeaways. I also want to just add a couple things that she mentions in this book, and I see this all the time, that when people are presented with the idea of being more compassionate, there tends to be a lot of resistance. Often one of the biggest things that comes up is people don't believe that they will be motivated to change if they aren't critical with themselves. So when offered the idea of being compassionate with themselves when they don't do what they say they'll do, or when they make a mistake, there's something in us that's like, I can't do that. Why would I ever do the thing that I want to do if I'm going to just be nice to myself even when I don't do the thing? And in this book, Dr. Kristin Neff actually offers that when you are being more compassionate, you actually start operating from more of a loving place towards yourself, and that loving place really does want the best for you, and that usually does involve change. And especially because you're not being critical when you fall short, it actually gives you some of that safety to try different things. One of the most amazing things about developing the practice of self-compassion is it's also helped me to develop self-trust. I had no idea that this is what was going to happen, but I think when I used to go to make a decision, I would struggle. I didn't trust myself to make the right decision. And now I see that what was happening is I was scared. I was scared that there was a right or a wrong decision, which I don't believe most of the time there is, and I'll make another video on that one day. But I think what I was really scared of is my own reaction to myself. So I was scared that I would do something that would end up where maybe it didn't work out how I wanted it to, I would fail to meet my own expectations, and then what I would ultimately do is give myself a very hard time about it. Or maybe I was afraid that somebody would say something to me that I would then interpret and feel bad. So what being compassionate to myself has allowed me to do is I know that no matter what decision I make, I will fail sometimes. I will end up in situations where things don't go the way I wanted them to, but I know that I will have my own back. I will be kind and comforting to myself when I mess up, inevitably, because I'm a human being. And because I know that I'll be good to myself in those moments, it's really given me the freedom to make decisions and not be so scared. And it's just made me so much more able to try to put myself out there, because I know I have my own soothing available to me no matter what. And I really hope that if this resonated for you, that you will read her book. I think it was so wonderful. So I'm going to conclude with a few things. I'm first going to read you 2 paragraphs that I really loved. There are so many, but these were 2 that I just thought were really beautiful. I wanted to share with you. And the third one is a mantra that she talks about using when you do have a moment of suffering, no matter how small. Like you're irritated, you're frustrated, you're annoyed with yourself, you're annoyed with someone else. And it's a mantra that reminds you to be aware of your suffering, be mindful. It reminds you of your shared humanity, and it reminds you to offer yourself some compassion, some kindness to yourself. So she recommends creating your own variation of it if it works better for you. I like the one that she does, and I sometimes put my own spin on it, but I usually do something very similar, and I actually try to use some of those active soothing practices at the same time. So I'll show you that at the end. So I'm going to conclude with those 3 things. Thank you. So here's the first one. No matter how difficult things get, we can always wrap our torn and tattered selves in our own soft embrace. We can soothe and comfort our own pain, just as a child is soothed and comforted by her mother's arms. We don't have to wait until we are perfect, until life goes exactly as we want it to. We don't need others to respond with care and compassion in order to feel worthy of love. We don't need to look outside of ourselves for the acceptance and security we crave. Okay, the second one is, when we experience warm and tender feelings towards ourselves, we are altering our bodies as well as our minds. Rather than feeling worried and anxious, we feel calm, content, trusting, and secure. Self-kindness allows us to feel safe as we respond to painful experiences, so that we are no longer operating from a place of fear. And once we let go of insecurity, we can pursue our dreams with the confidence needed to actually achieve them. And here I will leave you with the mantra. This is a moment of suffering. Suffering is part of life. May I be kind to myself in this moment. May I give myself the compassion I need. Thank you.